Here is Clemson through the eyes of the Tiger as seen during the 1980s. Ricky Capps was the number one Tiger during the 1980 through 1982 academic years. Ricky earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Agricultural Engineering in 1982. His hometown, Hendersonville, North Carolina. Here is his story. When I became the Tiger, I had big shoes to fill replacing Zach Mills. The team I was representing was joining Ohio State, Michigan, and Southern Cal, the real USC, just to name a few, as a national football power. I wanted to be the perfect representative for the university, as well as a great entertainer. What better way than being the Tiger? The suit gives you a sense of confidence and a personality that is bigger than your own. My first appearance was the 1980 First Friday Parade prior to the home opener against Rice. I rode my motorcycle in the parade as the Tiger. The next day, I rode into Death Valley without permission and was banned from riding in the stadium at future games. Today, I see the Demon Deacon leading his team onto the field with a motorcycle and wonder why I had to stop. Final score, Clemson 19, Rice 3. We arrived early in Athens, Georgia for the second game of the year, having made the 80-mile trip across the state line in two vans with the Clemson University seal on the doors. I had heard about dog fans but thought it was all hype. It wasn't. As we traveled toward the stadium, the fans walking along the streets would yell and taunt us as we passed by. In an effort to make an impression, I slipped on the suit, went out the passenger window, and climbed onto the roof of the car. This was immediately met with loud boos. Empty bottles were being hurled at the van as we passed the infamous train trestle near the stadium. Most missed, however, one damaged our windshield. Enough of riding on top of the van. Upon arriving at Sanford Stadium, the teams were stretching as the stands were filling up. I made my way onto the field to get a closer look at Herschel Walker, the Georgia running back. Herschel was everything they were writing about him, and in 1982 would win the Heisman Trophy. He looked bigger and more ominous the closer you got to him. Next was a walkover to the home of Uga, the team's bulldog mascot. As I was petting him, I asked if I could take Uga for a walk. After a few seconds, the person in charge agreed, but said to bring him right back. I set off down the sideline, and as time passed, they motioned for me to return. I shook my head. No! He started after me as I pulled on Uga's leash. Bulldogs don't run very fast, especially in the heat. I was urging him on and eventually seemed to almost drag Uga down the sideline. Georgia fans were booing, and Clemson fans were laughing. Eventually, a few angry guards caught up to me and retrieved Uga. Final score that day, number 10, Georgia 20, Clemson 16. Prior to another game, I decided to march with the Duke Flag Corps carrying a Clemson flag. The Clemson fans cheered loudly as I walked up and down the field. Later, during the game, I climbed up on the drum major ladder and pretended to direct the Duke band. I didn't realize the real drum major was on the ground looking up at me trying to do his job. On Monday, I had to write a letter of apology to the Duke administration. Final score that day was Duke 34, Clemson 17. The last conference game in 1980 was at Maryland. They had a car that looked like a turtle circling the track around their football field. I climbed on top and went for a ride. At the end of the field, there was a net filled with helium balloons to be released prior to kickoff. Well, after I got off the car, I headed to the net with the balloons, and I jumped into the net planning to lay there for a while. However, when I jumped, the net came loose, and all the balloons floated away. The Maryland fans and administration were not very happy. Final score that day, Maryland 34, Clemson 7. The second game in 1981 almost took place without the presence of the Tiger. The cheerleading squad and I traveled the 592 miles to New Orleans, once again in the two vans. On the day of the game, David Pinion, a cheerleader, was driving us around New Orleans when he got involved in a fender bender. The New Orleans police were called to the scene, and we assumed this would be taken care of at the scene, a minor citation issued, and we'd be on our way to the game with plenty of time. As Lee Corso would say, not so fast. If you're from out of state, you're taken to the police station and bail has to be arranged. I still remember David staring back at me from the back seat of the patrol car with this terrified look on his face as the car drove away. I followed the patrol car to the station, and time was now becoming a factor. Bail was set at $50. Well, David and I had $51 between us. With the bail paid, we sped off to the Louisiana Superdome. I changed into the suit as we pulled into the parking lot, and as I entered the Superdome, Tiger Band was playing, and I got there just in time to lead the Tigers onto the field. That was a close one. Final score, Clemson 13, Tulane 5. Anything can happen when you're playing Wake Forest on Halloween in Death Valley. There is no way I can describe what it was like doing push-ups during the game. First, I set the record for the most push-ups, 175 in the second quarter. Next, before I could finish doing 62 push-ups in the third quarter, the Tigers had scored again. This meant I would have to add 7 more to the total and begin another set of push-ups, 69 more. Finally, there was a memorable moment in the fourth quarter when the Demon Deacon mascot came to my assistance. The push-ups were taking a toll on this Tiger. With a little help from the Demon Deacon, a new record was set for the most push-ups in a game, 465. This was the first and only time a visiting mascot has ever done push-ups to celebrate a Clemson score. My fellow mascot was definitely a first responder to this Tiger in need. Now here is Clemson through the eyes of the Demon Deacon, Chris Kibler, as seen on that fateful Halloween afternoon. Well, it was a cloudy day in Death Valley, and it was getting cloudier by the minute as the Clemson Tigers had just scored their 69th point in the fourth quarter. I turned to our mic man, Joe Morrow, and told him that, despite the somber mood on our side of the field, I was going to try and brighten things up a bit. As the Deacon mascot, I couldn't help but feel sorry for my fellow partner in crime in the Tiger suit on the home team side of the field. He was struggling to keep up with the exponentially growing number of push-ups. So I thought, well, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. I wandered over to the end zone opposite of where the Tigers were hitting. When they finally crossed the goal line again, I ambled over to the Clemson cheerleaders and found a very fatigued Tiger, Ricky Capps, and basically mimed at him and to the crowd at the same time that I wanted to help him out in his time of need. It would be my honor to perform the 76 push-ups for him as a show of good sportsmanship. So they hoisted me up on that board, and I cranked out 76 adrenaline-assisted push-ups. The crowd went wild and proceeded to pass both the Tiger and the Deacon overhead to the top of the lower section of the stadium. Little did I know, but that little show of mascot cooperation would be featured in the college football section of Sports Illustrated the next week. That afternoon in Death Valley was certainly one of the most memorable highlights of my 3 years as the Deacon. It didn't take long for someone to print a T-shirt with a picture of the Tiger on it with his arms crossed over his head and the caption reading, "No more push-ups." Just think how tired the mascot would have been in 1901 if there had even been a Tiger doing push-ups when Clemson defeated Guilford 122-0 on Bowman Field, Clemson's original football field from 1898 to 1941. Final score that day was number 3 Clemson 82, Wake Forest 24. On Monday, I received a phone call from a radio station in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. The radio personality informed me we were on the air and that a bounty had been issued by a Tar Heel fraternity for $100 for anyone who would rip the tail from the suit and bring it to the fraternity house. Well, I gave a smart response assuring him that under no circumstance would the tail be torn from the suit. We had a fun exchange and the call ended. The next evening he called again saying the fraternity had heard the interview and had increased the reward to $250. I countered by saying we would add additional security with muscle-bound cheerleaders and a South Carolina highway patrolman to counter such an attack. It was all in fun, and the conversation ended. On Thursday, I received my final call from the radio station, and the disc jockey said the fraternity had again increased the reward, this time to $500 for the tiger's tail. I went silent and thought for a moment. When asked if I had a response, I told him that I was a poor college student, and for $500 I might deliver the tail personally to the fraternity house. Well, the station erupted in laughter. A couple of attempts were made for the tail during the game, but it remained intact, and Clemson went on to win that close game against the Tar Heels. Final score, number 2 Clemson 10 and number 8 North Carolina 8. There was no way I could top the experience of total exhaustion at the Wake Forest game. But this was a very special year in Clemson football. I was given the honor of dotting the I prior to the national championship game at the 1982 Orange Bowl in Miami. Thank you, Clemson University, and congratulations to Coach Ford and the 1981 football team on winning Clemson's first team championship. At the time, the only other championship had been won by Noel Loban in 1980 as a 190-pound wrestler. Final score, number 1 Clemson 22, number 4 Nebraska 15. My daughter Taylor, as a junior at Clemson in 2014, was fortunate enough to get a marketing internship with the athletic department. The doorbell rang at our house on my birthday in February. I opened the front door, and there stood the tiger cub, holding a sign that read, "Happy Birthday, Dad." What a great surprise! Not only was the cub visiting me on my birthday, but it was my daughter. As Clint Eastwood would say, make my day. Clemson always finds a special way to take care of family. In 2018, we lost another tiger. Randy Fail was the number 1 tiger during the 1982-84 academic years. Randy earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Administrative Management in 1984. Randy lived in Atlanta, his hometown, Aiken, South Carolina. Carol Ratchford was a cheerleader at my high school in Aiken. When she came to Clemson, she wanted to try out for cheerleading, so she asked me to help her with her stunts. When we arrived at the tryout at Fike Fieldhouse, there were about 100 beautiful ladies and about 50 or so guys. I liked the odds. I was hooked and was selected for the junior varsity squad. After a year on the JV squad, I made the varsity squad the next year. The cheerleading squad consisted of 6 males and 6 females, a mic man, a cannoneer, and me as the tiger. Ricky Capps, the tiger the past 2 years, was graduating, and he thought I'd make a great mascot. Nothing like getting a letter of recommendation from the former mascot who held 2 push-up records. Here I was replacing Ricky, and Clemson was the defending national football champion. Not much pressure for a rookie mascot. The cheerleaders and I went to Summer Spirit, National Cheerleading Association camp at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. During one of the cheerleader routines, I flew through the middle of the formation using a mini trampoline. What would have been a perfect 10 score in gymnastics helped me be named the mascot of the year at camp. It was a stunt I would repeat during basketball season, completing a full forward flip as I slam dunked a basketball. With my own championship in hand, I was ready to open up the home football season against Boston College. It would be my burning down the house moment. Dressed in full camouflage gear, I did a skit with a papier-mâché eagle borrowed from a First Friday parade float the previous night. After Tiger Band's halftime performance, I was poised on the 20-yard line with the cannon and my new papier-mâché bird. I started counting to 3. 1, 2, and on the count of 3 I pulled the cord and fired the cannon toward the eagle. The combustion from the blank shell sent the eagle through the air toward the upright and the end zone. Not quite a field goal, but a pretty good attempt if you ask me. After the smoke had cleared, I went to retrieve my prey and began the famous tiger swagger to the sideline. Before I could make it off the field, the eagle erupted into flames. I suddenly felt like I was on fire. I threw my head off, yes, unthinkable, and I dropped the burning eagle on the field. Coach Ford was in his well-known pose on one knee as his players were warming up after the halftime break. His glare toward me almost put out the fire. With some help from those on the sideline, we quickly extinguished the fire. It left a 3-foot circle burned on the home side. Final score that day, number 16 Clemson 17, Boston College 17. My chicken on the loose moment almost got me arrested. I know it wasn't a red rooster, however, a chicken is a chicken. There I was running on the field with a chicken tied to a rope until the chicken got loose. Clemson President Dr. Bill Ashley, 1979 to 1986, phoned down to the field and told 2 South Carolina highway patrolmen to grab me. I told the officer he wouldn't make it out of the stadium with me in handcuffs. Fortunately, he agreed, so we were able to get the chicken back into the coop. Everyone was happy, at least those who were Clemson fans. Final score that day, number 13 Clemson 22, South Carolina 13. Appearances at special events were not as prevalent in the early 1980s as they are today. However, Beth Cousins, cheerleader and 1983 homecoming queen, persuaded me to participate in the Egg and Dairy Festival in Newberry. The only regularly scheduled appearance I had was at Calhoun Corners in Clemson. I appeared as the Tiger after each home game to sign autographs, joke with the crowd, and have my picture taken. And afterwards I was able to enjoy a great meal, complimentary, with my girlfriend, Trelise Barton, who worked at the restaurant. She became my wife in 1986. All the former mascots watch the current Tigers. I can't stress enough how important it is to see an animated figure and not just a person in the suit. This means using huge motions throughout the day, from walking to running and especially waving to the crowd. Each gesture or action you make in the suit has to be to the extreme, or you just look like a guy dressed in a suit. We want to see high energy. As you're constantly reminded, someone is always watching you, especially those in the mascot fraternity. Our next Tiger was Jay Watson. Jay became the number 1 Tiger during the 1984-85 academic year. Jay earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Management in 1985. His hometown, Greenville, South Carolina. Here is Jay's story. President Ashley called and asked if I wanted to attend a re-election rally for the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 1981 to 1989. It was in Greenville, South Carolina, along with members of the Tiger Band. That was an easy answer. What an honor! Upon arrival at the rally, the Secret Service went through every inch of the bag which was holding the Tiger suit. Wearing gym shorts and a T-shirt, I was also given a pat-down. From that point on, I had an agent assigned to me and was asked to stay put until they were ready for me. 45 minutes later, I was briefed again by a Secret Service officer. My spot on the stage would be adjacent to the podium. I was not allowed to do anything but sit. No big movements toward the president, or I would be pulled off the stage. They were very clear this was to be taken seriously. I had a Clemson baseball hat that I asked if I could give to the president. They said it would be okay, but I had to do it as he walked on the stage. Once again, I was reminded no big movements and no sudden advances toward the president. I took my place on stage with Greenville Mayor Bill Workman and U.S. Congressman Carroll Campbell, Jr. He would later become the 112th governor of South Carolina. When the president arrived on stage and was close to the podium, I managed to get around all the dignitaries and hand him the hat. He immediately put it on, and the crowd went crazy. After a quick handshake, I went back to my seat with my duties now complete, or so I thought. President Reagan was a former movie actor who played George the Gipper Gipp in the 1940 movie Newt Rockney, All-American. The movie is on television every year, it seems, mysteriously right before National Signing Day and the beginning of football season. During the president's seemingly endless speech, I think I might have nodded off a bit, until I got a poke in the back. There's a video that shows my head adjacent to the president suddenly turning around and looking between the curtains behind us. The same Secret Service agent who told me to sit still and not make any sudden movements had given me the nudge. He said, "You need to do your job and get this crowd excited." So without overthinking the moment, I waited for a chance in which I could stand up and clap. I found that moment, stood up, and the crowd responded. I sat down quickly and noticed that the president had no idea that I had stood up. He thought it was his words. He seemed to find some new energy and left his monotone delivery and started to get into the moment. I continued to stand and sit, saluting when he made reference to those serving in our armed forces, clapping as appropriate, and generally getting the crowd into the event. It was an absolute blast. At one point, Reagan acknowledged my antics with a huge smile and a nod. As things wrapped up, I led a 4 more years cheer that seemed to go on for 5 minutes. I finally left the stage, worked the crowd, and found my way back to the bus, all in a day's work. One of the traits of being a mascot is to be spontaneous, but in front of the President of the United States? Imagine my surprise the next morning when I woke up and saw the Greenville News headline, "Tiger throws partisan support to Republicans." It was a media storm for the next 3 days. Congressman Campbell wrote me a personal letter saying he was sorry for the turmoil, but if there was ever anything he could do for me, to just let him know. President Reagan sent me a signed photograph of us together with a Clemson hat in his hand. President actually eventually called me to his office with no fewer than 5 media trucks and cameramen wanting an interview. We talked baseball, politics, and Clemson for 30 minutes while the media waited in the lobby. He then asked if I wanted to be interviewed. I had already endured 2 days of this, and I said, "Not really." He agreed and led me out of Sykes Hall through a back way so I could avoid further questioning. He was great and laughed about it, saying this would certainly make for fun conversation years from now. Boy, was he right. How many people get a chance to meet a U.S. president, much less get to be part of his show? That is the power of the Tiger. Even the president needed the help of the Tiger that day. My mom made a scrapbook of the photos and articles from this event, which we display prominently in our home. Looking back on this day, what could have been perceived as mocking the president fortunately was a positive game changer for the rally. It was one of the reasons that the mascots today do not attend political appearances. Since then, I've had a couple of opportunities to spend time with President George Herbert Walker Bush, otherwise known as Bush 41, and we've laughed about this story. I parachuted out of a plane in 1985 and 1986 for stress relief from IBM school. Bush 41 made tandem jumps on his 80th, 85th, and 90th birthdays. Okay, let's get back to how I became the Tiger. Woody Binnicker and I were both on the cheerleading squad. Woody decided he wanted to be the head cheerleader and the mic man, and I wanted to be the Tiger. To be the mascot, you still had to make the cheerleading squad. I always thought this limited the pool of possible candidates, so we started a conversation with the administration about getting an independent tryout for those who wanted to be the mascot. We both made the squad, and I became the Tiger. Putting on the suit for the first time was electric, just like my first skydive. A rush that was one part euphoria and one part, you better not mess this up. Our outside appearances were always optional, but the administrators advised us to regard those that we should strongly consider. One of my first appearances was at Special Olympics. This is still one of my most memorable events. Other memorable events were a ladies' luncheon, not for this book, and an alumni fundraiser in Greenville. My most memorable game day experience started with me walking from my dorm room in Johnstone Hall to the stadium for the first time. It took me 30 minutes to make the 100-yard walk. I had no idea how many people would stop me for a picture or ask for an autograph. It was everything I had hoped it would be times 10. After the game started, I was walking on the sideline early in the first quarter, getting used to the stadium and where I could go. There didn't seem to be any limitations. I decided to stand on the sideline next to Coach Danny Ford. He was in his usual squatted position about the 40-yard line, so I positioned myself about 5 yards from him in a similar squat, stroking my chin, moving my arms around after a play. Then, all of a sudden, I hear, "What are you doing here? Get him out of here, now!" A couple of assistant coaches were laughing as they kicked me off the sideline. Pretty funny looking back on it, but I can certainly understand the displeasure Coach Ford showed at the moment. Today, there are police officers, strength coaches, assistant coaches, and administrators monitoring everyone on the sideline. Final score that day, number 4 Clemson 40, Appalachian State 7. My visit to Scott Stadium in Charlottesville, Virginia was a memorable day. The Tigers shut out the Cavaliers, and I did 303 push-ups. I don't know how Ricky Capps did his 465 against Wake Forest a few years earlier. This feat should be considered legendary. Final score that day, number 3 Clemson 55, Virginia nothing. Being ranked number 2 in the country and on top of the world can change quickly. A week later, I was standing under the goalpost at Georgia when Kevin Butler kicked the game-winning 60-yard field goal with 11 seconds remaining. The outcome took a toll on everyone. I watched as the ball crossed over the bar with only a couple of yards to spare. Every table in the locker room after the game had a body on it with an IV in a player's arm. I could not take a step or even sit up without every muscle cramping due to the dehydration. When you fall fast. The Tigers fell 11 spots in the polls on Monday. After another loss the next week to Georgia Tech, 28-21, the Tigers were out of the top 20. Final score, number 20 Georgia 26, number 2 Clemson 23. Interacting with the student body was always a highlight. During each game, I would walk back and forth on the platform with the mic man. Next thing I know, I was body surfing from the front to the back row of the stands through the Kappa Sig section to see my date or get a small, or sometimes large, dose of bourbon. They would generally drop me in the crowd of brothers, pull my head off, give me a mouthful of something, put my head back on, pick me up, and send me off, all in 20 or 30 seconds. It was a blast. Wouldn't dare try that stunt today with cell phones and television cameras everywhere. Still, to this day, most people ask why sitting at a basketball game next to Shawn Weatherly, 1980 Miss Universe, was not my best memory. Wow, she was pretty, nice, and it was the one and only time I really thought about violating the no-talk rule. As I look back, being the Tiger has forever endeared me to the school. It has opened doors, created relationships, and made me laugh for more than 30 years. Midway through the 80s saw David Friedman become the number 1 Tiger during the 1985-86 academic year. David earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Administration Management in 1986. His hometown, Rock Hill, South Carolina. Here is his story. Jay Watson had asked the administration the previous year for a separate mascot tryout, and a year later it happened. I was selected as the Tiger. No more being a cheerleader first and then being selected to be the mascot. Everyone was excited in Clemson as the football program was coming off 2 years of no televised games due to sanctions by the NCAA. The top CBS announcer, Brent Musburger, would be calling the second game of the season against Georgia. Brent's rival at the time was ABC's Keith "Whoa Nellie" Jackson. It was at this game that Brent coined the phrase, "the most exciting 25 seconds in college football." The night prior to the game, I had hid 4 large poster-sized cards in Memorial Stadium. The next day, I paraded around during pregame for over an hour. You're always nervous whenever you're in the Tiger suit because you do not know what the fans actually notice you doing, either intentionally or unintentionally. I had a Crown Royal bag tied tightly to my paw or wrist, and near the end of the first quarter, I flashed the first cue card towards where my girlfriend was sitting with the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity in the stands. She was probably thinking, "Oh gosh, what's he getting ready to do?" The first card read, "Terry Underberg," followed by "Will," followed by "You." By the second card, all the women knew what was happening and were beginning to clap. Conversely, all the guys had a puzzled look, like alcohol-induced, in response to the first 2 cards. By the third one, I could hear them all screaming, "Don't do it!" It was all soon put to rest by the final card, "Marry me?" Then I climbed into the stands, maneuvered up to where she was, and in keeping with tradition, put the Tiger's snout up to her face. I then asked her in person to be my wife, apologizing that while I wanted to do so, I couldn't take off the head, so I couldn't punctuate it with a kiss. I then untied the Crown Royal bag and handed it to her. It contained her ring. We've been together ever since and have 3 grown children. We lost the game, but I got the love of my life. Final score, Georgia 20, Clemson 13. Clemson is a special place, especially at the end of the game when kids jump over the wall onto the field. After one game, I recall a young girl running eagerly with her arms spread in hopes of being the first to hug the Tiger. She ran full force into me, and we hugged. Immediately, she pulled back with a grimacing look and yelled, "Oh, gross! I've been slimed!" What a special moment in her life. I'm sure as an adult she still remembers that embrace, along with thousands of other children and adults who have hugged one of the mascots after a long, hot day in the sun. My engagement made the beginning of the season fantastic. The season, however, was just average for both South Carolina, 6-4, and Clemson, 5-5, heading into the final game of the year down in Columbia. A win could send you to a bowl game, a loss you'd be heading home for the holidays. The Tigers defeated the Gamecocks 24-17 and were invited to the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana, to play the Minnesota Golden Gophers. South Carolina went home for the holidays. Bowl games are usually fun and often unique, especially when playing someone from the Big Ten Conference. Shreveport wasn't nice to the Tigers as we lost to the Gophers 20-13. However, for this Tiger, it was an honor to meet Marine Lieutenant Cleve McClary, who delivered a moving breakfast speech on his experiences in Vietnam. Lieutenant McClary lost an eye and an arm during a reconnaissance mission. He would later be presented with a Silver Star and a Bronze Star. What a great and honorable man. Hoorah! My claim to fame was when I hit legendary North Carolina head basketball coach Dean Smith in the nose. At the time, North Carolina was ranked number 1 in the nation. As the teams were heading to the locker rooms for halftime, I was entering the tunnel when a fan asked me to slap him 5. Coach Smith wasn't paying attention, and was just off my left shoulder when I stopped, planted my feet, and extended my left arm. That's when his schnoz and my elbow connected just like a punch in one of the Sugar Ray Leonard-Roberto Duran fights. It was so forceful, his head went back, and he literally thought he had been punched. I was clueless about what was transpiring until I started feeling girly punches. Coach Smith was punching me. At that point, I instinctively went into fight mode, not knowing who it was, only that some fool seemed to want some of me. As I drew back to defend myself, the players grabbed me and were yelling, "You're going to get expelled! What are you doing?" Clearly, no one knew at that time that he started it. Coach Smith refused for a while to continue toward the locker room and instead wanted to fight. Well, the remainder of the game, he kept holding his nose while he yelled at his players on the court. Soon the fans were mocking him by holding their noses. The night ended in a draw. Final score, Tiger 1, Schnoz nothing. Followed by number 1 North Carolina 79, Clemson 64. Our next Tiger was Chris Shimakonis. Chris was the number 1 Tiger during the 1986-87 academic year. Chris earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering in 1988. His hometown, Greenwood, South Carolina. Here is his story. They posted the names of the 1986-87 cheerleading squad on the outside door of Mel Hall. I walked over before lunch, saw my name, and was super excited. I couldn't wait to get started as the Tiger. Our annual summer camp was in Memphis, Tennessee. After a week of all-day camp and summer heat, the squad was exhausted and ready to return to Clemson. The passengers settled in for a nap in our van, while Luke Lucas and I took over the driving duties. Everyone else was in a deep sleep. We opened the small window vents so Luke and I could get some air, but turned the fan heat on maximum and flooded the cabin with super hot air. A perfect combination for a hot July day. It took 5 minutes before the group woke up. Everyone was sweating, and some looked like they were ready to cry. If you can't laugh at others, who can you laugh at? Such is the goal of a mascot. Football season began with an opening loss to Virginia Tech, 20-14. We then traveled to Athens, Georgia to play the Dogs. It was 88 degrees with 54% humidity outside the stadium and probably over 100 degrees on the field. The game ended with David Treadwell's 46-yard field goal going through the uprights as time expired. The Tigers had upset the Dogs. Following the game, you could see their fans throwing some of their relatives, chili dogs, into the air as they were leaving the stadium. Final score, Clemson 31, number 14 Georgia 28. We had some really fun personalities on our cheerleading squad. Once during a football game, I borrowed a tube of lipstick and smeared it on the mouthpiece of John Shelby's megaphone. After several cheers with the megaphone pressed against his mouth, he finally realized why the fans sitting in the first few rows were laughing. He had a red ring mustache and goatee, similar to the look of comic actor Charlie Chaplin. My old buddy Luke never wanted his uniform or hair out of place, just like the mascot after me, Martin Lowry. This often made Luke a target for the Tiger. When it rained during games, the Tiger's tail would be muddy and soaked with water. With the tail in my hand, I would strike Luke across his back. Then I would yell to Luke, "You may want to shout that stain out." I had ruined his pretty boy looks. I had a mannequin prop as my homecoming date for the Duke game. I carried her around with me the entire day. We ran down the hill together. We did cheerleader stunts together. We even got passed up into the student section. Unfortunately, it got a little out of hand, and I had to apologize to several fans through the Dean of Students' office the next week. Final score, number 17 Clemson 35, Duke 3. During the season, a fan gave me a pair of Tiger Paw boxer shorts and asked me to wear them for good luck. The timing was just right during a night game at home against the Tar Heels. After completing a set of push-ups, I stood up on the push-up board, and all of a sudden, there was an orange moon. The students loved it. The Dean of Student Life, not so much. The stunt landed me in a second meeting with the Dean as the Tiger. I guess it was no laughing matter. Final score, Clemson 38, North Carolina 10. The best skit I ever performed was when I impersonated Coach Ford during the start of the 1986 Maryland game. Due to his conduct the previous year, after a 34-31 home loss to Maryland, Coach Ford was suspended from the field by the ACC officials. He was then allowed to coach from the press box at Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. The Terrapins would occasionally play games in the larger stadium. It was 47,855 versus 34,680, instead of on campus. During his weekly press conference, Coach Ford commented to the media he would be on the field as the Tiger. So I ran out with the team, spitting tobacco, pacing the sidelines, and imitating Coach Ford. After about 10 minutes, a CBS representative asked me if they could do a story on my antics as the Tiger. The answer was yes. In 2014, I became the interim head football coach at Palmetto Christian Academy. While coaching a game from the sidelines, I got wiped out on the play, breaking my leg in 4 places. This caused me to miss the mascot reunion later that fall. I should have coached from the press box. It's safer and helped Coach Ford and the Tigers win the first of 3 consecutive ACC championships, 1986, 87, and 1988. Final score, number 15 Clemson 17, Maryland 17. The next weekend in Clemson, the unthinkable happened again for the 4th and last time while playing South Carolina. When the game ended, 82,492 Clemson and South Carolina football fans left the stadium speechless. Everyone went to their cars, packed up their tailgates, and headed home, wondering how this could happen again. There were no bragging rights. Final score, number 19 Clemson 21, South Carolina 21. The 1986 season ended in Jacksonville, Florida, with the Tigers playing the Stanford Cardinal in the Gator Bowl. The game was dominated by the Tigers 27-0 in the first half. I couldn't wait to get to the locker room to get out of the suit for a few minutes. Coach Ford greeted me with a, "You must be exhausted. Here, take mine." He handed me the Coke he had been drinking. That drink reminded me of the 1979 Coca-Cola commercial featuring Mean Joe Green of the Pittsburgh Steelers throwing his jersey to a little boy after a game. Final score, number 21 Clemson 27, number 20 Stanford 20. Cheerleaders and mascots had the opportunity to join the Block C Club as a letter winner. To become a member of Block C, we had to make a wooden paddle, paint it orange, and get signatures of members on the paddle. The toughest signature to get was Coach Howard's. The end of the week was drawing near, so I hung out at the Jervey Athletic Center, waiting on Coach Howard to leave. When he finally came out, he asked me where I was from, and I said Greenwood. Anyone can coach, but to become a legend, you have to tell a great yarn. Well, he immediately went into stories about Pinky Babb and Walter Cox. He said back in his early days as a head coach, Clemson was a military college with no girls on campus. He would send his assistant coaches after practice down to the train station to stop players from leaving campus for one of the state co-ed schools. It was truly a highlight for me to listen to that legendary figure. Martin Lowry was the number one Tiger during the 1987 through 89 academic years. Martin earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering in 1988 and a Master of Business Administration degree in 1992. His hometown, Lawrence, South Carolina. Here is his story. What is the meaning of no-show? Well, it's when someone is advertised to be in attendance and then does not make the appearance. In 1987, that was me. As the new Tiger, I left the hands to the suit in my University Ridge apartment. When I went back to my apartment to get them, I realized I had left my keys in the Jervey Athletic Center laundry room. Thank goodness I knew my second-floor sliding glass door was unlocked. While acting like Spider-Man, I scaled the brick wall, scraping my knee as I went up and over the railing. This scrape was actually a laceration to the top of my kneecap. With one hand on my knee, I walked downstairs to get help from some friends, girls, of course, and they freaked out when they saw the blood. Instead of going to Redfern Health Center on campus, I calmly told them to take me to Jervey to see the team doctor. Dr. Larry Bowman was the new orthopedic surgeon, and after a couple of stitches, the knee ended up being fine. But I have a scar to this day, a reminder of my no-show. The suit was downright nasty after a football game. In an attempt to make it bearable for a Sunday soccer game, I hung it out of the window of my room in the Sigma Alpha Epsilon house to air out overnight. The next day, a little girl came up to me and said, "I know where you live." I looked at her and shrugged my shoulders. She said it again, but this time she pointed to my room, which overlooked the soccer field. I shrugged again, and she said for a third time, "I know you live up there because I saw you hanging out the window." That little girl had ridden past the soccer field, looked across toward my room, and saw the Tiger hanging out of the window. I picked her up and gave her the biggest hug ever. I was a freshman when Clemson won their first national soccer championship in 1984. 3 years later, I got to participate in the presentation of the 1987 National Soccer Championship trophy during halftime of a basketball game. The Tigers claimed their second national championship in 3 years following their 2-0 victory over San Diego State at historic Riggs Field. In 1988, I had a CO2 fire extinguisher as a prop with Raid, the bug killer, written on the side of it so I could spray Buzz, the Georgia Tech student mascot. Instead of spraying Buzz, I sprayed the giant blow-up yellow jacket that stands in the end zone at Georgia Tech. I got away with it 2 times during the game, but on the third attempt, the security guard came up to me and said, "If you do that one more time, you'll be escorted out of the stadium." Well, needless to say, I stopped and watched the Tigers sting the Yellow Jackets. Final score that day, number 12 Clemson 30, Georgia Tech 13. While working in the 1989 ACC baseball tournament in Greenville, a North Carolina State player decided that my tail looked like a play toy and started to pull on it. Well, I put my hand out to shake hands, but just as he reached for me, I grabbed his hat and took off. The crowd laughed loudly when they noticed that he was bald and embarrassed. Well, next thing I knew, I got a message that the North Carolina State coach, Ray Tanner, was going to protest to the league office about my behavior. That coach is now the athletic director at the University of South Carolina. Final score that day, Clemson 9, North Carolina State 2. During Halloween 1994, I was visiting my girlfriend, Suzanne Mullis, a College of Charleston graduate, in Charleston. Her roommate, who had introduced us, was C.C. Dalton. I was wearing one of the old Tiger suits as my costume. The girl standing next to me asked if she could hold the head. I said yes and turned my back, and the next thing I knew, she disappeared. I didn't know her name, but all I could think was, Elvis has left the building. How often do you see a cougar come to the rescue of a tiger? I didn't see Suzanne leave my side to chase after her, but a couple of minutes later she returned with my head in her hands. And since that day, she is still by my side. Nothing has changed. We got married in 1995, and today she keeps an eye on 2 tigers, our son Thomas and me. We end the 80s with Stuart McWhorter. Stuart was the number 1 Tiger during the 1988 through 90 academic year. Stuart earned a Bachelor of Science in Management in 1991 and a Master of Science in Health Administration in 1993 from the University of Alabama, Birmingham. His hometown, Atlanta, Georgia. Here is Stuart's story. During a rainy 1988 Clemson-Florida State game in Death Valley, I wet my tail and swung water, and maybe a little mud, toward the Florida State fans. They were next to the hill where the Tiger Band sits today. After a couple of phone calls and letters, I had to go in front of the administration the next week to apologize. This was that famous Punt-Ruski game, when a fake punt called by the Seminoles head coach Bobby Bowden led to the game-winning touchdown. Final score, number 10, Florida State 24, number 3, Clemson 21. While in the suit at a February 1989 basketball game, I approached ACC official Lenny Wirtz during halftime to shake his hand. Without looking at me, he said, "Tiger boy, you better turn around and get away from me, or I'll call a technical on you right now." I did as instructed, since I didn't think head basketball coach Cliff Ellis would have been too happy with me. Final score, Clemson 85, number 8, North Carolina 82. 9 months later, we were staying at a hotel across the street from the Carolina Coliseum in Columbia. It didn't take long for someone to understand this rivalry. Our advisor had only been in Clemson for 3 years prior to the game, and during those years, Clemson was 1-1 against South Carolina. He had the idea to display our 10-by-15 Tiger Paw flag out the window. Well, it took about 15 minutes and several complaints from South Carolina fans for the manager to knock on the door and order us to remove the flag. At halftime, I went out on the field with a tuba to stir things up in the middle of the South Carolina band performance. Needless to say, I upset a lot of Gamecock fans and band members at the same time. It was fun playing in a large polka band. Wish Lawrence Welk still had his big band television show. Final score, number 15, Clemson 45, South Carolina nothing. When making off-campus appearances, I was always amazed at how many women hosts would ask to help zip up the suit. Was it because of the man in the suit or the suit itself? Funny, they were not around when it was time to get out. During these appearances, the older kids would pull the tail and poke their fingers in the holes of the eyes. I couldn't talk, so a good firm handshake usually would solve the problem. All the mascots who have worked the Sun Fun Festival in Myrtle Beach will agree it's one of the best events in the state. I don't know if it's the sun, the beach, or the ladies on the Tropicana suntan lotion float. If you want to visit a patriotic city, then Easley and its 4th of July parade is a good place to start, especially if you like to dance to the Carolina Shag while riding on a float in a parade. I'll never forget Ace Bowie coming to my rescue from the ladies during one of the hottest days of the year. Ace used to sing in a beach band, Pieces of Eight, with former head basketball coach Cliff Ellis as a guest singer on several occasions. Easley is the hometown of Army Captain Kimberly Nicole Hampton, the first woman combat pilot to be killed in battle. If you're driving on Highway 88 near the community called Slabtown, there's a stretch of the road along with the Pickens County Public Library in Easley named in her honor. Her mother, Ann Hampton, wrote a book about her life titled Kimberly's Flight. A common denominator shared among all the mascots or any Clemson student is that we all want to give back. The thousands of hours we've all been in the suit, whether at an athletic event, a parade, or visiting someone in a hospital, is a great way to give back. In the mid-1990s, George Bennett, then the executive director of IPTAY, approached my family about making a donation for a statue of the Tiger to be placed next to Memorial Stadium. The original idea was for two giant tigers, similar to the one that guards Littlejohn Coliseum. As time passed, a decision was made for a more playful tiger to reflect the one that roams along the sideline. Today, the tiger stands at Gate 1 of Memorial Stadium, pointing to the sky just like many coaches and players do prior to running down the hill. The statue's location is symbolic since it's next to Gate 1 where the students enter the stadium.